Mayday, mayday, mayday! Falcon 7 emergency! I've lost control. Immediate descent. Requesting vectors.
The runway is too short. Viktor Belenko knows this the instant Hakodate Airport fills his windshield. He's been calculating fuel for the last 40 minutes, doing cold arithmetic at 6,000 meters above the Sea of Japan, and the numbers were already bad. Now, they're catastrophic. The MiG-25 Foxbat, the fastest military aircraft in the Soviet arsenal, a machine capable of Mach 2.8, is gliding in on fumes. 30 seconds of fuel left, maybe less. Below him, a civilian Boeing 727 is rolling down that same runway, climbing toward him. Belenko doesn't flinch. He banks hard, drops the nose, threads the gap, and slams the Foxbat onto the tarmac. The drag chute deploys. The brakes scream. The aircraft tears through 9,843 feet of runway in seconds and still doesn't stop. It overruns by 790 feet, finally shuddering to a halt just short of the localizer antenna at the runway's end. Silence. Then, the hiss of cooling engines. Viktor Belenko unstraps himself, climbs out of the cockpit, and does something no Soviet pilot has ever done. He raises a pistol above his head, not in threat, in surrender, and shouts 4 words at the stunned Japanese airport workers now sprinting toward him. I want political asylum. It is September 6th, 1976, and the Cold War just changed forever. To understand what Belenko has just done, you need to understand what he was supposed to be. Viktor Ivanovich Belenko is born in 1947 in Nalchik, a small city tucked into the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains in Soviet Russia. His father is Ukrainian, his mother is Russian. His childhood is unremarkable in all the ways that Soviet childhoods are designed to be: ordered, disciplined, state-approved. But from the beginning, one thing separates Viktor from the children around him. He is obsessed with aircraft, not as machines, as escape. He earns his wings young, trains as a flight instructor, flies Sukhoi Su-15 interceptors at the Armavir Pilot School in Krasnodar, where he is consistently rated among the top pilots in his class. He is precise, composed, mechanically gifted. His superiors notice. They mark him for advancement. By 1976, Senior Lieutenant Viktor Belenko is assigned to the 513th Fighter Regiment, 11th Air Army, Soviet Air Defense Forces. His unit is based at Chuguyevka Air Base, a remote posting 120 miles northeast of Vladivostok, deep in Russia's far east. It is about as far from Moscow as you can get while still being inside the USSR. And it shows. The base is falling apart. Infrastructure is crumbling. Equipment is outdated or broken. Heating systems that should be maintained are not. Proper food supplies arrive sporadically, if at all. Pilots are flying some of the most sophisticated aircraft on Earth and coming home to living conditions that embarrass the very ideology they're supposed to represent. Belenko watches the gap between what the state promises and what it delivers. He watches it every single day. And he starts keeping a mental ledger. He makes suggestions, flags maintenance issues, raises concerns through official channels. The political officer, the Zempolite assigned to his unit, the man whose job is ideological enforcement, dismisses him, ridicules him in front of his peers, labels his concerns as defeatist thinking. This is the Soviet system working exactly as designed. But Belenko isn't alone in his suffering. His wife Ludmila has her own ledger. She is miserable. The life of a military spouse at a remote Far East posting is grinding and isolated, and she has had enough. By the summer of 1976, she tells Viktor directly. She is filing for divorce in October. She will take their 3-year-old son Dmitry to Magadan, her family's home. Viktor will be left with nothing. A crumbling base, a political officer who mocks him, a marriage ending, a son about to disappear from his life. He has been thinking about defection for a long time. Now, he starts planning it seriously. You cannot understand Belenko's defection without understanding what he is sitting in. The Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-25P Foxbat is not just an aircraft. In the West, by 1976, it is a myth. The story begins in the early 1960s. American intelligence becomes aware that the Soviet Union is developing an interceptor of extraordinary capability. They catch glimpses, through satellite photographs, through signals intelligence, through defector reports, of a twin-engine aircraft that appears to be capable of speeds no Western jet can match and altitudes no Western jet can reach. The fear hardens when the MiG-25 publicly appears in 1967, performing impossibly fast flyovers at the Domodedovo air show outside Moscow. Western analysts run the numbers. They come out believing the Foxbat can sustain Mach 3, that it is a highly maneuverable air superiority fighter, that it is a generation ahead of anything in NATO's inventory. The fear cascades into policy. The United States Air Force accelerates development of the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle, specifically to counter this machine. Billions of dollars, years of engineering, all directed at neutralizing a threat they cannot fully see. Then there is the broader strategic terror the MiG-25 creates. Beginning in 1971, modified reconnaissance variants of the Foxbat, stripped of weapons, running on raw speed, begin overflying the Middle East and Israel at will. Israeli F-4 Phantoms scramble to intercept. They cannot get close. The MiG-25 simply accelerates away. U.S. military leadership is so unsure that the USSR has no equivalent interceptor for the SR-71 Blackbird that Washington withholds authorization for SR-71 reconnaissance flights over Soviet territory until 1976. Let that sink in. The most capable reconnaissance aircraft America possesses is being kept out of Soviet airspace partly because of fear of the MiG-25. No Western intelligence service has ever seen one up close. No Western technician has ever touched one. And now one is sitting on a civilian runway in Hokkaido, Japan. Brand new, complete with its pilot's technical manual, the one Belenko brought specifically because he intended to help American pilots evaluate it. CIA Director George H.W. Bush will later call it an intelligence bonanza. That phrase barely captures it.
At 6:45 in the morning, Belenko walks his 3-year-old son Dmitry to the kindergarten at Chuguyevka Air Base. He does not look back. He goes to the base. He suits up. He is part of a group training flight, standard exercise for the 513th Fighter Regiment. Paired flights, standard routes, no deviation expected. The weather is partially cloudy, ceiling between 1,500 and 5,000 meters, suitable conditions. Takeoff is at approximately 12:50 p.m. local time. Belenko follows the flight plan at first. His wingman flies alongside. The formation holds. Then, over the sea, Belenko reports engine trouble and separates from the group. He descends. Not slightly, he drops the Foxbat to 50 meters above the waves, nearly sea level, and pushes east. At this altitude, both Soviet and Japanese air defense radars struggle to track him. He is a 36,000-kilogram aircraft threading through radar coverage gaps at wave height, dodging fishing boats in the morning mist over the Sea of Japan, flying for his life. He doesn't know if the KGB already suspects him. He has learned, though details remain classified, that Soviet intelligence was close to moving against him. The defection has been brought forward for exactly this reason. He has a narrow window. He flies for nearly an hour at low level. At 7:40 a.m., the Foxbat crosses the Soviet-Japanese maritime boundary. Belenko climbs. He rises to 6,000 meters, deliberately exposing himself to Japanese radar. He needs them to see him now. He needs this next part to work. At approximately 1:10 p.m., Japanese air defense radar at Chitose Air Base on Hokkaido picks up the contact. The operators stare at their screens. An unidentified aircraft, IFF transponder not responding on any known Japanese or American code, is inside Japanese airspace. 2 McDonnell Douglas F-4EJ Phantom IIs from the 302nd Tactical Fighter Squadron scramble to intercept. They never find him. The weather over northern Hokkaido is poor. Belenko's radio is set to Soviet military frequencies that don't match Japanese or American air defense bands. The F-4EJs cannot communicate with the aircraft they're hunting, and the ground radar is not precise enough to vector them onto it in the deteriorating conditions. The Foxbat slips through, but Belenko has a separate problem now. His fuel gauge is in the red. He had planned to land at Chitose Air Base, a military field jointly operated, better equipped to handle what was coming, but he cannot find it. The weather is closing in. The fuel is nearly gone. He scans through cloud breaks. He finds Hakodate. He finds the airport. He circles 3 times. Civilian aircraft on the tarmac. A single runway. Short. He has no choice. He lines up. He descends. The Boeing 727 comes out of nowhere, climbing on the same runway. He banks hard, clears it, drops the Foxbat down, and burns through 9,843 feet like it's nothing. The drag chute doesn't save him. 790 feet of overrun. The plane stops. Viktor Belenko is alive. At 2:10 p.m., Japanese police arrive and immediately close Hakodate Airport. They arrest Belenko, technically for unauthorized entry into Japanese airspace and for carrying a firearm. When they ask him why he is here, his answer is immediate and unambiguous. He wants asylum in America, not Japan, America. The process moves with startling speed. On September 7th, Japanese authorities transfer Belenko to Tokyo. On September 8th, 48 hours after landing, the United States formally grants him political asylum, approved at the highest level of government. On September 9th, the diplomat from the Soviet embassy in Tokyo arrives and attempts to persuade Belenko to return. The conversation is brief. Belenko refuses. On September 10th, Viktor Belenko boards a Northwest Airlines flight and disappears into America. Behind him, sitting on the tarmac at Hakodate Airport, is the USSR's most classified military aircraft. Surrounded by Japanese soldiers, being photographed by civilians who wandered in before security arrived, Moscow is silent for 22 days. The Japanese government covers the MiG-25 with tarps. They deploy 200 troops from the 11th Division of the Ground Self-Defense Force with Type 61 tanks and 35mm L-90 anti-aircraft guns. The Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force deploys 5 ships, 3 on the Sea of Japan side, 2 on the Pacific, and patrols the Tsugaru Strait continuously between September 8th and September 25th, genuinely concerned about a Soviet attempt to recover or destroy the aircraft by force. The Soviets push hard for its return. They insist, absurdly, that Belenko became lost. Then they claim he was drugged by the Japanese. When both stories fail to convince anyone, they press for immediate return of the aircraft. Japan's Ministry of Justice formally transfers jurisdiction of the MiG-25 to the Defense Agency on September 9th. Then a quiet diplomatic negotiation begins. American diplomat Nicholas Platt, the political section duty officer at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, paged off the courts at the Tokyo Lawn Tennis Club on Labor Day while the story was breaking, becomes the key handler on the American side. Platt and his Japanese Foreign Ministry counterparts devise a solution that is, as one account describes it, very Japanese. They tell the Soviets that the Foxbat's landing gear was damaged during the overrun. The aircraft needs to be transported for inspection and dismantling before it can be returned. This requires moving it to a larger facility. That facility is Hyakuri Air Base, north of Tokyo, jointly operated with the United States Air Force. On September 25th, the MiG-25 is partly disassembled and loaded onto a U.S. Air Force Lockheed C-5A Galaxy cargo aircraft, escorted by F-4 Phantoms for the flight from Hokkaido to Honshu. Someone attaches a banner to the Galaxy in English and Japanese. "Goodbye, people of Hakodate. Sorry for the trouble." At Hyakuri, American and Japanese technical intelligence teams go to work. They have access to Belenko's own technical manual to guide them. They disassemble everything. They examine every system: the radar, the engines, the avionics, the weapons interface. And what they find rewrites the threat assessment that has shaped American air defense planning for a decade. The MiG-25 cannot sustain Mach 3. Its engines will destroy themselves if pushed past Mach 2.8. Its range is severely limited, a fact Belenko nearly demonstrated fatally over the Sea of Japan. It cannot refuel in flight. Its massive AA-6 Acrid missiles, the weapons supposedly designed to destroy SR-71s, are ineffective against their intended targets at the speeds involved. The aircraft has almost no low-speed maneuverability. In close air combat against an F-15 or even an F-4, the Foxbat would be a target, not a threat. It is, as one analyst puts it, not a fighter bomber. It is an interceptor, a very fast, very specialized interceptor, nothing more. The F-15 Eagle program, billions of dollars, years in development, shaped in significant part by fear of this aircraft, is revealed to be chasing a phantom. As aviation historian Peter Ustinov will later summarize, the MiG-25 was indeed an extraordinary machine, but not the one the West had imagined.
The consequences extend further. American SR-71 reconnaissance flights over Soviet territory, previously withheld partly out of deference to MiG-25 threat assessments, are cleared to resume. The entire calculus of Cold War air power has to be recalibrated. One man did that. One underpowered morning flight over a gray sea. On October 2, 1976, Japan announces it will return the MiG-25 to the Soviet Union. The aircraft is billed $40,000 for crating services and airfield damage at Hakodate. The Soviets demand to inspect the crates before shipment and submit their own bill for $10 million, citing 20 missing parts. The missing parts include the flight film recording Belenko's journey to Japan. Neither bill is known to have been paid. On November 15, 1976, the MiG-25 leaves Japan in 30 crates aboard the Soviet cargo vessel Tygonos, bound for Vladivostok. Back in the USSR, it is reassembled. It is never flown again. It becomes a training aid at an aviation academy in Daugavpils, Latvia. Viktor Belenko spends 5 months being debriefed by the CIA and the US Air Force. The sessions are exhaustive. They want everything. The MiG-25's technical specifications, Soviet Air Force operational doctrine, pilot training standards, morale across the force, command structure vulnerabilities. Belenko gives them everything. What he describes about Soviet pilot training shocks American analysts. The poor conditions, the inadequate equipment, the rigid command culture that punishes initiative and rewards compliance. The gulf between what Soviet propaganda claims about its military and what Soviet pilots actually experience. President Gerald Ford formally grants Belenko asylum in October 1976. Belenko is given a trust fund. He becomes a naturalized U.S. citizen, fast-tracked by a special act of Congress passed in 1980. He takes a new name, Schmidt. He consults for the U.S. military and for defense contractors. He keeps an almost entirely invisible public profile for the duration of the Cold War. The Soviets, for their part, never stopped trying to discredit him. State news agency TASS publishes its official response on September 28, 1976, 3 weeks after the defection, claiming the landing was forced. On the same day, Soviet authorities hold a press conference in Moscow featuring Belenko's wife and stepmother, who beg him on state television to come home. His wife claims he will be pardoned if he made a mistake. He did not make a mistake. Over the following years, Soviet and Russian propaganda cycles through stories about Belenko. He was killed in a car accident. He returned to Russia. He was arrested and executed. None of it is true. He lives quietly, feared that one day the KGB, or its successors, might reach him. They never do. Back in the Soviet Union, the fallout is severe. The 513th Fighter Regiment is effectively dismantled. Officers responsible for base security face courts-martial. The entire Soviet Air Defense Command structure in the Far East undergoes review. The MiG-25 program accelerates modifications to address the vulnerabilities Belenko exposed. New radar systems are developed. New IFF protocols are implemented. Countermeasures the West didn't know existed are quietly redesigned. And in Magadan, a small port city in Russia's Far East, Belenko's son Dmitry grows up not knowing where his father is. This is the part the history books rarely linger on. Viktor Belenko left a 3-year-old boy at a kindergarten on the morning of September 6, 1976, and never came back. He didn't know what choice he was making in that moment. Stay and slowly suffocate inside a system that was consuming him, or fly east and abandon a son who would grow up with state propaganda as his only explanation for his father's disappearance. He chose to fly.
Whether that was courage or cowardice or some terrible combination of both is a question only Belenko could answer. He co-wrote his autobiography, MiG Pilot, The Final Escape of Lieutenant Belenko, with Reader's Digest journalist John Barron in 1980. He acknowledged that he had a wife and a son in the USSR. For years before the book, he had told his American associates that Soviet claims about his family were propaganda. They were not propaganda. This is who Viktor Belenko was. Not a symbol, not a chess piece. A man in an impossible situation who made a devastating choice and spent the rest of his life carrying it.
Viktor Ivanovich Belenko dies in September 2023 at a nursing home in Rosebud, Illinois. He is 76 years old. He has lived under a changed name for most of his adult life. He has almost never given interviews. He has spent nearly 5 decades in a country that welcomed him, used him, and then let him quietly disappear into the American interior, far from Moscow, far from Magadan, far from the ghost of a little boy walking through a kindergarten gate on a September morning. The MiG-25 Foxbat remains, to this day, the fastest military aircraft in active service anywhere on Earth. Russia still flies modernized variants. The airframe designed to frighten America into building the F-15 is still operational more than 50 years after its first flight. And the F-15 Eagle, born from the fear of a myth, has never lost an air-to-air engagement. One defection revealed the myth. The myth, dismantled, built something real. That is how intelligence works at its most consequential. Not in the vast machinery of satellites and signals and encrypted cables, but in the decision of one human being on one ordinary morning. A man who walked his son to kindergarten, climbed into the most feared aircraft in the world, dropped to 50 meters above the waves, and flew east. He never looked back. The question that lingers, 47 years later, is not whether Viktor Belenko changed the Cold War. He did. The question is what it costs a man to become that kind of turning point, what it costs the people left behind. What we do with a history built not on clean heroism, but on the rubble of ordinary lives. A crumbling airbase, a failing marriage, a child's hand letting go of yours for the last time. The Foxbat landed. The myth was buried, the Cold War pivoted, and somewhere in Rosebud, Illinois, a man named Schmidt watched the sky.